Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Yunus, chapter 10, verses 66 to 73, we will cover today. And the main point over here, in my opinion, is empowering the human self by following the Quran. These are our references, and this is our contact in case there is any query or question. Recap verses 59 to 65. The system of Deen requires that its boundaries are clearly defined beyond any ambiguity. Hence, the Quran has clearly defined halal, which is the permitted side, and haram, which is prohibited in every respect. Anyone interfering with this arrangement is committing a crime against Allah, and this has serious consequences for this life as well as for the hereafter. We have gone through this aspect in some detail. And over here, the issue which we should keep it in mind and keep reminding ourselves is that it is not about Allah. It is about us. When we do not follow these boundaries which the Quran lays down, then ultimately we suffer in this life as well. Deen explained in the Quran is haqq, which is the system, totally free from any kind of Zann. And Zann is doubts, suspicions, conjectures, dissonances, uncertainties, which we create or our mind creates for us as we live our life. Nothing in the universe escapes the vision of Allah, and when mu'mineen are busy in their daily work, including seeking guidance from the Quran, they are in the sight of Allah. Everything in the universe and the human world follows the laws of Allah. These are evidently perspicuous. If you remember, there was one verse where Allah says that when you are going through the Quran, I am witnessing it, I'm watching it, I'm hearing you, I see you going around in your business. Those who decide to become companions of Allah by overcoming the darknesses of life and come into the light of Wahi, their fear and huzn disappears. They are those who, after acquiring Iman, willingly strive on this path and become muttaqi. Next is through their striving, they receive glad tidings of this life and the life of the hereafter. All this is placed within their grasp by Allah, that is through His laws, of course. These words of Allah never change, and those who achieve this level of development of the self, this is what they become. And no one can take it away from them as it is what they are. We know that when we acquire education, for example, in man-made system, this education and training and experience becomes part of ourself. Nobody can take it away. Nobody can steal the knowledge which we gain through our education. And same position is here. Quran again and again refers to it that you become something different after acquiring Iman and by doing salih deeds. Those who follow this path never get upset because of what others say. They know Allah is with them, and this path will take them to that destination which the Quran has highlighted clearly for them. Now let us look at the first verse for our presentation today. Reflecting on the word and the universe is part of the process of seeking guidance. Allah inna lillahi man fis samawati wa man fil ardi wa ma yattabi'u allazina yad'una min dunillahi shuraka'a in yattabi'una illa zanna wa in hum illa yakhrusun. Do you not see how this immense and spectacular system of the universe is functioning according to His laws? Just assess the control of Allah from this one matter. This is such a reality, the evidence for which can be obtained from the domain of knowledge and vision. But those people who include other partners in this authority along with Allah, do they follow knowledge and vision? Not at all. They only follow conjecture and presumption and merely resort to guesswork. Frequent contemplation in the physical universe helps to remind us about Allah as a model. And we have seen in the Quran that there are numerous verses in which Allah says that heavens and the earth belong to Him. He is the owner of these. He has created all of this from nothing. And this is to draw our attention. These statements are for someone who possesses choice and intent and has intellect and emotions and desires. Because to animals, these are meaningless. It is to human who should start taking some meanings out of it, some understanding out of it. In this verse, the outer universe is presented as evidence for the human intellect to ponder on the purpose of creation with emphasis on us to think deeply on this matter. Animals cannot make sense out of the universe, whereas we can. But if we do not or cannot, then there is no difference between us and animals. I put a question mark over here. So it is not a derogatory statement, it is a statement of fact. And we should look at it and reflect on it continuously so that we get maximum out of our life. Interestingly, even those who appreciate the functioning of the universe under precise laws and being very suitable habitation for intelligent life such as humans do not divert their attention towards the higher purpose of life. The question for us is, why is this so? Most acknowledge the existence of some creator with higher intellect, but they do not pursue this line of inquiry. Is it that Muslims have failed to apply the Quranic approach to the creation of the universe and human creation itself? Is it because they do not understand these aspects themselves? For example, there is a series on YouTube, Closer to Truth. And if we look at various things discussed over there, you will see that highly intelligent people come on that forum and they discuss it. But their mind never goes in the direction of higher purpose of life. Do we think that if the books by Allama Pervez are widely read, some of them may be attracted to this line of inquiry of finding a higher purpose of life based on the life of the hereafter? These are some of the questions which need our reflection. What I've done in this under second point is that I've generated some questions for us to think. And hopefully as we will go along, we will find answers. Not today, but in our future presentations. Comprehending precise concept of Allah is part of coming to terms with the system of being. Those who look for partners other than Allah do not focus their attention on the importance of understanding the concept of Allah as explained in the Quran. Since this concept is based on divine attributes, hence their attention is focused more on praising Allah as if it will benefit them, rather than looking at reflecting these attributes in their own selves. Since we have understood this aspect, therefore we need to explain it to others. So merely praising does not solve any problem. And our mind should go to this aspect that when we translate words like hamd, then what does it mean? Where do we stand in terms of our understanding towards the system of Deen and towards solving human problems? If we live life without coming to grips with the concept of Allah as given in the Quran, then we follow those concepts which are invented by the human intellect or are contaminated by human thought. As a consequence, we simply cannot acquire that self which the Quran has invited us to have in order to resolve human issues in the world. Here the Quran has called it Zann, which includes all kinds of doubts, suspicions, conjectures, uncertainties, etc., arising in the human heart and mind. Giving space to a wrong concept in our minds is counted as injustice, because we are not supposed to have these suspicions, conjectures, uncertainties. We are supposed to remove them, because then our best will come out. And Quran helps to remove them. So that means if we are not finding any space for that concept of Allah, which is given in the Quran, then essentially our mind still stays contaminated. So that's the point I'm trying to make over here. The interesting part of the verse is the use of وَإِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَخْرُصُونَ. This term is used for conjecture, lie, vain talk, unsubstantiated opinions, guesswork, that is yakhrusun. Haqq is based on facts and on constructive outcomes. Hence, the Quran is providing a comparison with its guidance by pointing to the fact that it has come from the creator and owner of the universe. And that is the important aspect which we should keep it in mind, that when Quran says that Allah owns samawat wal earth, heaven and the earth, then our attention is being drawn towards his own self as a model, so that we understand that we are dealing with his laws. And in this world, if we follow his laws, then we will be able to do what is our destination. It is about defining the source of empowerment to man to invite him to make an informed choice. So important is that we have to make an informed choice. If we do not, if we discount the choice which the Quran is offering us, then essentially we are living this life without a choice. We are just saying that the life will end with death, or life will go beyond death, but on those assumptions, on those uh, what you call desires, which we have created through religions. Path to grasping the issues of human life. Now, over here, I've drawn this schematic. I added it later on, and I said, why not to look at it in a slightly different perspective. For example, over here, I've put a picture here, 39% people in Pakistan live in poverty. And across the world, if we see, for example, in Africa, children are in a terrible state. Poverty leads to illiteracy. And over here, there's a child, and if we can see, there's a man with a cap, probably a religious fellow, and they all pass through, probably not even think about it. And this is the state. This is a photo taken from 1948, refugees created in Palestine. And we can see the situation is not much different. In fact, all over the world, there are refugees created by wars and conflicts by human hands. Now, here is a person who says, what can I do? Okay, I know about these problems, but what can I do? And we can put ourselves in that, or we can ask others to put themselves into that and say, if human beings are created problems, those human beings who don't like these problems, what can they do? I know this, what can I do? And over here is empower the self via the Quran, become eligible for Allah's help. And Quran has given us the option. What Allah says is that become my companion, and then I will guide you. I will help you. I will protect you. I'll provide you security. And then you come together and create a Jamaat and then see how things develop in your favor. Individual to collective striving, value-driven learning, and that is Iman plus Saleh deeds. An important point is that when we acquire Iman as defined by the Quran, then whatever we do subsequently in our efforts towards Deen, those become Saleh deeds, because Saleh deeds are those which bring all latent potentials out into the open, and we know it, and others will also recognize it. Now let us go to the next verse, 1067. In everything we do, there are signs for us, and this includes our sleep and our business during day. هو الذي جعلكم الليل لتسكنوا فيه والنهار مبصرا إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يسمعون. If these people had reflected on only one aspect of the system of the universe using knowledge and insight, then the supremacy of the law of Allah would have been apparent to them. They would have witnessed that He has bound the massive heavenly stellar bodies such as the sun and moon in the chains of His control, so that these are continuously in orbit. Due to their orbiting, night arrives in which you take rest, then alternately the day appears in whose light you go about your business. In this, there are great signs indeed of the harmony of the law of Allah and its strength for those people who consciously listen and comprehend. And we see that this verse is coming after the Samawat and Al-Ard statement. Now, let us look at the root of the word litaskunu used in this verse. Sukoon, and this is the root, disappearance of movement. And we know that at night, for example, we are static. We literally become, we are not aware of our environment. To stop, to adopt habitation, or to reside, for a moving thing to become immobile. And from sukoon is the word miskeen as well. Miskeen is someone whose movement has stopped for some reason, for example, hunger, deprivation, and we know what it means because there are plenty in the world. Weakness also used for peace of heart, peace and tranquility through, for example, prayer, peace of mind. So the context in which this word or its derivatives, this root and its derivatives are used in the Quran, we should keep them in mind, and it will help us to make sense of those verses. Some applications, it is used in relation to sleep, and this is another verse in which it is quoted. Your prayer, salat, is a cause of peace and tranquility for them. It is addressing the messenger of Allah. And we also see that when, for example, as parents, we give some reassurance to children, then it is a source of strength for them. Or, for example, some friends, relatives, or in a matter of grief, we do help by providing some kind words and showing some compassion. To reside and settle somewhere, also because it is in relation to habitation, in connection with the display of weakness as well. For example, if it's worth looking at this verse, it is quite interesting because it needs some deeper reflection. That when we are doing something, and if we become stagnant or stop or do not show enough enthusiasm for that, then it is shown, it is also used in that context. A kind of inertia with which nations suffer, not being able to employ their potentials which they possess. So we can see there are quite wider range of meanings of this root. He who falls down due to weakness and is trampled upon. And this is very interesting because there are a number of points in these verses before and after. And for more details, we can look at Lughat al-Quran. Further reflections on this verse. Firstly, we notice the language used here by Allah to draw our attention. By linking the creation of night with sleep, Allah invites us to reflect on this fact that every process is carefully planned for mankind, i.e., the verse is structured in such a way that it appeals to our intellect. For example, if we think there are no human beings and only animals are living on this planet, then day and night will mean nothing to those animals. Of course, they will also go to sleep and go through it, but without realizing the importance of sleep. So over here, the Quran is drawing our attention that this whole system of the universe and earth is, if it is going around the sun and creating day and night, there is a purpose behind it. Secondly, there is always a purpose in every part of Allah's creation. Here, the darkness is for our brain to take rest after being in use during daytime. And there are some nice videos on YouTube. We should watch them, that how the brain functions and how it replenishes or recoups itself during night or during the period of rest. And this is to take place in an environment of peace and tranquility. And it will only become a sign for us if we notice this fact as well. Next is, thirdly, when we wake up from sleep, relaxed and joyfully recognizing the sign of Allah, that night did refresh us as noted by him, and which essentially means to be at a higher level of consciousness than just getting up in the morning and going through the routine. If we give it some kind of a thought, then we will see that it will add to our self. We enter the domain of the light of day. Here we notice another sign of Allah. Recognition of the passing of serial time is also implicit here, i.e., become conscious of the finitude of our stay here. Finally comes an important aspect of the verse. Why has the Quran used hearing and not akal or reflection here? The Quran has asked us to use our senses effectively to capitalize on perceptive knowledge and to then convert this into our understanding, which helps to develop ourselves. Here we can use these signs to draw the attention of others. For example, in a social gathering, talking to children, talking to families, to make a conversation, even a lecture. So what I started looking at it, that the word yasma'un used over here means that we should look at it, that why Quran is emphasizing on sama, on our hearing. Hearing as an aid plays an extremely important part in our social interaction with the world and needs to be used effectively in our cause. And I'm sure we can expand the meanings. False beliefs have an expiry date. We look at the next two verses, 68 and 69. قالوا اتخذ الله ولدا سبحانه هو الغني له ما في السماوات ما في الأرض إن عندكم من سلطان بهذا أتقولون على الله ما لا تعلمون قل إن الذين يفترون على الله الكذب لا يفلحون. Among them, there are also those people who hold this belief that Allah also has a son who aids him in his affairs. Say to them that Allah is far above this, that he will need progeny for his aid. He is not in need of anyone's aid. Whatever is in the highs and lows of the universe, all is busy in the completion of his defined program. That Allah, who is the possessor of such supreme powers, how can he be in need of aid from anyone? Ask them if they even have an authority and evidence to support this belief, or do you keep relating such sayings to Allah about which you have no knowledge? Say to them that those people who concoct beliefs in their own minds and then relate these towards Allah without evidence can never succeed. And this is important that whatever beliefs we are holding, if these are not based on facts, then those cause damage in the world. These not only cause damage to us, but through our interaction and the way we create our world, it will affect that as well. As the light of knowledge keeps spreading through the world, these kinds of superstitious beliefs will keep being declared as batil. And we can already see that in the West, which is quite scientific now, a lot of these beliefs, which are quite prevalent among religious people, these have disappeared. We need to fully come to grips with ourself and its functioning. This verse sets the scene for us to add a very important fact of human creation to our self's development. Wherever there is a self possessing choice and intent, it has the same attributes of its indivisibility and unity. It cannot replicate or reproduce anything like itself. This is for the human self, while in the case of Allah, over and above these attributes, He has other attributes as noted in this verse. So the important point is that at a self level, we cannot replicate. For example, whatever education, experience, training each one of us have, if we have children, they will come with a blank slate. Their self will not have all these qualifications, education, and experience. Biological birth is a very animalistic process through which reproduction takes place. Let us expand this verse further. Firstly, Allah does not reproduce. He is a being with infinitely developed attributes, and anyone attributing progeny to Him simply does not understand the nature of His self and hence of His own self. And this is an extremely important point to understand, that at a self level, now we know that we cannot replicate, we cannot reproduce. And secondly, if it was possible to do that, then Allah being possessor of infinitely developed attributes, then we can see the implications of that. So over here, Quran is drawing to a very high level of reflection, which we require to understand these things. And these can only be understood with a developed self. He's thinking at an animalistic level, which he needs to address through the Quran. We possess a self and we simply cannot reproduce what our self becomes. Reproduction is a biological phenomenon and it is an animalistic level. Secondly, Allah simply does not need the aid of anyone, and this is implicit in the possession of an infinitely developed self. Such a self possesses the capability of innama amruhu iza arada shay'an an yaqula lahu kun fayakun. Over here, Allah has made us aware that when you have an infinitely developed self, then essentially whatever you wish, it starts happening. And that is the point which Quran is drawing our attention to. And of course, implicit in this is that if we as mu'mineen, as his companions working for him, what kind of a powerful companion we have. And if we deserve that companionship, will he leave us alone? Will he fail us? And that is the point which we should keep it in mind. When he intends to carry out some amr, he just decrees be and it begins to take place. Then is accepting man-made beliefs without questioning leads to living a meaningless life. And this is a very powerful statement which I made over here as a title to this slide. Notice that only Allah has appeared in the verse as it is about his self. For example, not Rabb. Then it states that they say things because they do not make any effort to acquire knowledge which will lead to an increase in comprehension, a very essential part of our self's development. Why it is important to know this? What difference will it make if we hold this false belief and die with this false belief being a part of ourself? The answer to this is simple. Our self has not acquired new life which meets the requirements of the life of the hereafter. We lived a life at an animalistic level. Because we thought like animals, we attributed the animalistic traits to our God as well, and saying that he's got a son. And how can we have that self which meets the requirements of the life of the hereafter? The Quran has factually stated that Walaka Zarana لجهنم كثيرا من الجن والإنس لهم قلوب لا يفقهون بها ولهم أعين لا يبصرون بها ولهم أذان لا يسمعون بها أولئك كالأنعام بل هم أضل أولئك هم الغافلون. Very powerful statement of fact in relation to human beings, that many of human beings who live in whether nomadic life or in urban areas, they are the ones who have hearts, who have cognitive abilities, but they do not use them. They have eyes, but they don't see. They have ears, but they don't hear. And as a result, they just become like animals. In fact, they become worse than animals because animals do not have cognitive abilities. They cannot make choices. They do not have intellect. And as a result, they remain ghafil, they do not benefit from all those benefits which the Quran is asking them to get those right in this life and live a life at a highly developed self level. I.e., most human beings do not make use of their cognitive faculties and hence live life at a sub-animalistic level. This is not a derogatory statement, as animals are also the creation of Allah and have an important role to play in the rububiyyah. It's not to downgrade human beings. Nobody can drown other human beings because they have their own intrinsic respect and dignity. The issue over here is to state the facts. Because if we live at that level of existence where we do not make use of our potentials, which we are supposed to make use of, then we are essentially creating a world which is not good for mankind. The issue here is that if our self has a specific purpose in creation and has been given requisite cognitive faculties to grow itself, and it fails to utilize these, then it fails to meet that criterion. Consequently, it goes to waste. For example, I've given an example over here that even in the human system, through quality control, we discard those items which do not meet a specific standard. And all these, for example, all these cars go through a very, very strict and stringent quality control. All electronic goods go through that same. All these supermarkets, they want vegetables, for example, of a certain size and of a certain quality. And all those which do not meet that criteria, those are discarded. Why? So in our own life, if we have such strict standards, why should we object if Allah has got similar standards for us? Because the same brain which is thinking of having these kind of criteria in its own world, then why should it become upset if Allah tells the same brain, the same mind, the same eye, the same human beings that I also have laws and I also have standards, then you should follow those so that you can benefit. Man-devised systems are raised on false foundations which can never work for the good of mankind. Verse 1069 sums up this fact that whatever false beliefs you insist on holding on to are going to impact yourselves, and it is better to question these beliefs and reflect profoundly on what is being noted here for you to understand. When the Quran invites us to say through pull, it also asks us to think and comprehend before passing on your understanding to others. So wherever pull, normally we say that it is addressed to Rasulullah, but it is addressed to us as well. For example, this presentation is through this manifestation of the speech quality or the vocal quality which is given to each one of us. It should not be a mechanically delivered message, but it needs to have the force of conviction and motivation behind it. For example, whatever slides I'm now reading through and presenting my understanding, if it does not have force of conviction and motivation behind it, then this is meaningless, because that conviction, that force will be manifesting to yourself. And we have seen speakers who talk in monotonous tone, and a lot of people go to sleep. Employing a force of conviction is part of our self-development. This is why the Quran directs us to promote good and forbid evil. This means we need to be able to differentiate between good and evil and their effects. The verse concludes by declaring a fact that Innal lazina yaftaruna ala Allahil kaziba la yuflihun. Those who invent lies and live life by holding on to these false beliefs do great harm to themselves and also to those with whom they interact as a community. They can never prosper. Here, here we need to keep in mind that prosperity is not related to the physical means of sustenance and their accumulation. It is related to the self, as telling lies and perpetuating them is very much a trait of the human self. So whatever we see in the Quran, we should look at it from self's point of view, because it is self which has the capacity to expand, to multiply, to go beyond what we got initially. Body will remain the same. In fact, body through the aging process is going to die at some stage in our life. Consequences of wrong beliefs. People of all religions have attributed those traits to the founders of their religions, which place them far higher than the status of a human being. For example, divinity, miracles, saintliness, holiness. And over here, founders means all those messengers of Allah. And the messengers of Allah, these people called them founders, whereas those messengers of Allah did not find this, they did not create the system of Deen. System of Deen consistently is the same with the same values. It is that people forget it and then the message was revived. And now, of course, Quran has arrived among us as a final scripture from Allah, which makes it impossible for them to follow them as human beings. Because if we raise the level of a human being in our own mind, in our own eyes, far, far higher than ourselves, then we will start worshiping him or her. We'll say that I cannot be like them. And the moment a human being says that I cannot be like another human being, that means he or she is degrading himself. And over here means that, and the Quran nowhere says that you cannot be like these messengers. When it says, for example, about the last messenger, that he was on Khulqan Azim, Quran wants us to be on Khulqan Azim. And this is within our reach, because if we cannot, then essentially we are saying that the formula of the Quran was only applicable then. Now it has no value. It has diminished in its value, which is a very, very serious allegation against Allah. These attributes never existed in the initial revelations and were added through tampering over a period of time by human minds. The Quran arrived and presented the factual position to mankind for all times and removed all these elevated statuses and told man that the messengers of Allah were human beings just like any other man. What they did, others can do too as human beings. Other human beings are meant to become like them so that mankind can prosper. It warned us not to do this, otherwise we will also immerse ourselves in all those superstitions and wrong beliefs, which then lead to habitat amaluhum. And habitat, we know that its meaning is that those deeds which look very attractive, but underneath there is nothing. This means we will create evidence-based Jahim in this life for the whole of mankind. And Jahim is that state where we do not develop. We remain at the same point. We live like animals. We eat, drink, and go to sleep, and again get up next day. And we contribute to a miserable world around us in which fear and huzen prevails. In verses like this, we need to look at the impact on the human psyche and its consequences in relation to the system of being. Few more aspects needing our attention. The Quran arrived and asked man to know his value as possessor of a self which is based on divine energy. Alimat nafsu maqaddamat wa akharat. And see the word used nafs over here. Nafs is something which has choice and intent. And we have to, of course, see in the context in which it is used in the Quran. I.e., every nafs will find out what it has sent forward and left behind. It asks man to become conscious of his own thoughts and deeds within the permanent values and then see the transformation taking place within his self. Then Allah presents his own self as a model for the human self. For example, Quran says, Kataba ala nafsihi rahmata, that Allah has made rahmat as a law on himself. See, rahmat over here, that is related to nourishment and sustenance, so that it can expand its potential in worldly life by doing deeds of rahmat as directed through the Quran. Following this pattern will make man free from every kind of fear which will otherwise hold him back and prevent him from exercising the true freedom required to carry out those tasks for which man possesses all the latent potentials. So Quran is giving us that kind of a freedom. And once we enter that domain of freedom, which is created by the Quran, then we will really feel ourselves free. We will exactly know that we have totally become free from fear and huzn and understand the way the world is working and what is expected out of us and what are the potentials. Because working as a companion of Allah is a great achievement. And understanding that means that we have really raised our, and we have really given a higher meaning to our life. Recognizing the significance of this freedom is part of our effort to understand the Quran. We essentially move from the finite domain of our physical existence to an infinite domain of our consciousness. Inverted commas, I put it here just to make sure that this infinity is not the one which is applied to Allah. This is a human infinity, where we enable ourselves to view life at a higher and wider plane of existence. Now let us go to the next verse, 1070. Becoming continuously conscious of the finitude of our physical life is part of avoiding pitfalls. Mataun fil dunya summa alayna marji'uhum summa nuziquhumul azab ash-shadida bima kanu yakfurun. Though through this kind of self-concocted worship of batil, some temporary worldly benefits are obtained by the religious clergy, ultimately the decision of all these matters will take place according to our law. So when Quran says Mata'un fil dunya, it is essentially applicable to every one of us, but over here it is somehow Allama Pervez has directed it towards religious clergy, because they are the ones who present religion, and as a result, human beings, they become distracted. At that time, these people will have to suffer the severe destructive consequences of their devious striving and superstitious beliefs. Because whatever we do, it has consequences. So if we are doing in an earlier part of life something wrong, then these will appear in the later part of our life, which the Quran says, Al-Azab Shadid. Further reflections on this verse. This verse makes it further clear about what is stated in 1069, i.e. lies and temporary benefits of the man-devised systems can never provide that developed self which meets the Quranic criteria. The term noted here in relation to punishment due to kufr is al-azab shadid, a severe azab. Even in our physical life, all of our physical ailments, difficulties, and hardships create an impact on our psyche. The Quran has referred to the outcomes of our deeds as rewards and punishments, and we need to relate these to the state of our psyche at those points in time. The Quran is drawing our attention that whatever is happening in your life, you should be extremely conscious of it and look at the causes which are contributing to these problems. A punishment is light if it disappears in a short time. It is a medium if it stays, for example, for a few years. It will be very severe if we know that we simply cannot get out of this state as the opportunity to address the issue is lost forever. And this is that azab shadid in which the Quran says you will neither die nor live. And imagine the world which we have created for certain people, they are in this state where they can neither die nor live. The Quran refers to this severity and invites us to look at it with this perspective. The self manifests its states of development through our psyche and our behavior, attitude, and conduct in the outer world. If the duration of the physical existence of ours is, for example, 40 years of life without many issues, we live at the level of a developed self, then for the life of eternity in the hereafter. And over here, what I've done is just to draw our attention that, for example, 1 billion years, what cost-benefit ratio will appear before us? Let us say that we have lived a life, 40 years of life at a developed self level, following the Quran. Whether Deen is established or not, let's not take that into account. And 40 years to 1 billion years, and this means that we got 1 billion years to live in the hereafter. And we can do a simple mathematic and then see that every year probably will have millions of years of life in the hereafter. related to that. Furthermore, this life lived under Quranic guidance will always be lived better, as it will be in pursuit of the system of Deen, pursuit of a supreme aim of life. If we have a supreme aim of life, which is not going to end with our death, imagine how beneficial that life is. And while we are living even in man-made system, this makes horrendous difference to our line of thinking. And that is the point I'm trying to make over here. Next verse 1071, the messengers of Allah were also human beings. How did Nuh deal with his nation? And this is an important verse, and I'll go through some of its finer details. I'll go through the meanings as to what kind of results are established through devious striving and superstitious beliefs. But this bring before them the accounts of past nations. First of all, tell them the story of the nation of Nuh. We know that in the Quran, it has referred to some of the messengers from the past and the state of their people. And these were those messengers whom Arabs were familiar with. So that is what we should keep it in mind. It's not about a particular person, but we should look at the message which the Quran is trying to convey to us. When Nuh told his people that if my staying here and warning you about the laws of Allah is so burdensome, I cannot refrain from my important duty despite this, and I care nothing but about your opposition. Then whatever you wish to do against me, put maximum force behind this and call all your supporters in this too. And make sure that no aspect to oppose me remains obscured from your sight. And do whatever you wish to do, and do not give me any respite whatsoever. My trust is in Allah. If I follow his laws, he will never let me remain unsuccessful. And see how powerful this statement is, which the Quran has passed on to us, that what kind of a self Nuh had and how he addressed his people. Of course, he perceived opposition from them, and he also knew that he is becoming a trouble for them, a burdensome for them, but he stood up to them and told them with full conviction. And that is what is reflected here. Some aspects of Nuh as a model noted here. Having gone through some issues related to human self, Allah brings before us the example of his men from the past who lived their lives in line with his guidance, of course, in his presence and fully aided by him. Here the Quran has quoted from Nuh, the messenger of Allah of earlier times. Firstly, the Quran has pointed to this fact that when people who live a misguided life are warned, they do not appreciate this because we have ended up breaking their inertia. We have asked them to think. They wish to keep following their evil path as it suits their vested interests. We can witness this in different parts of the world. This is an evidence-based sign of an Iblisi system. In the system of Deen, no one will ever mind any warning from anyone, because the whole system will be based on this permanent values that they will warn each other, forbid evil, and promote good. Procedures will be in place as part of accountability to report any lapses or errors or delays, and these will be rectified happily. Such acts will be encouraged and appreciated, unlike the evil systems in the world. Secondly, Nuh states to them that I simply cannot stop from my task, as it is the way I have become. Because when haqq becomes part of our psyche, then we wish to share it with others. If we don't, then we see clearly that evil spreads, which is not acceptable to mu'mineen. Messengers of Allah remain focused on their mission, so do mu'mineen. Thirdly, Nuh tells them fearlessly that I have a certain task given to me by Allah, and I will do it despite your strong opposition and resistance, and I will not stop from performing this task. This is due to my iman. So that was the consequence of his iman and amal saleh, that his self had developed that level where he never stopped from what he was supposed to do under the way of Allah. Of course, he was earning his living as well. Probably he was a farmer, he had some land and he was tilling that. In another verse, the Quran states that Nuh told them, Ya qawme la as'alukum alayhi malan in ajriya illa alallahi wa ma ana bitaridil lazina amanu innahum mulaqu rabbihim. O my people, I ask you for no wealth in return. My reward is with Allah, but I will not drive away those who have Iman, for they are to meet their Rabb. Just note Rububiyyat being the aim here. Because elsewhere the Quran says that all those, particularly average people and poor people, the message of Allah appealed to them and they gathered around them and they created some kind of a small Jamaat of Mu'mineen. And over here, the Nuh has very clearly told those who are in position of power that these people are not going to go away anywhere, whether you like it or don't like it. So Nuh was very clear that abandoning this path means continuation of the wrong system being in place, which will lead to more misery for the poor and deprived. It's a great motivating factor based on clear evidence that we need to keep pursuing this path of Allah. Because if we give up this path, Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, then we can see the world around us. This world has been created because there is no Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, or if there is some kind of remnants of Mu'mineen around, then they are not strong enough to change anything in the world. Then comes the display of the strength of Iman and resoluteness acquired through this Iman. You do whatever you like, I will not give up my mission. Let Allah come and help me in the event that you wish to harm me or prevent me from doing my assigned task. Just see the power the power of conviction which Nuh is displaying in this verse. There is great instruction and guidance in this for us. Never give up, as this is the path in which success is intrinsically inbuilt. The reward of following Allah's path is inherent in the development of the human self. This is the next verse, 72. فَإِن تَوَلَّيْتُمْ فَمَا سَأَلْتُكُمْ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ وَأُمِرْتُ أَنْ أَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. So continuing from the same verse, now Nuh says this, and if you refrain from this opposition of yours and adopt the path of Haqq, then this is in your own interest. I do not ask for any recompense from you for this. My recompense will be bestowed on me by my Allah himself. And that Allah who has told me to be among those people who bow down their head before his law and commands, and also tell others that they should also do the same. Striving on the path of Allah has rewards built into it. Recognizing this aspect is part of the self's development. All messengers of Allah stated the same, that they do not expect any recompense for their work. In fact, one's mind does not even go to that direction, because once we are moved by the misery and grief and fear in the world and we come to the Quran, the material side essentially disappears. It does not mean that we stop earning our living. That is fine. But aim then becomes that humanity should benefit from what is stated in the Quran, what is given in the Quran. And we recognize that without the Quran, the world will not change. So that is the kind of a situation and our understanding to which we reach. This point needs a profound reflection. Human beings are generally geared towards expecting some return for their efforts and do not wish to waste their time in pursuing something which is not likely to reward them, either materially or with some abstract pleasure or both. Here, Nuh has made it clear based on evidence that all he wishes for them is a system of Deen to replace the existing arrangement of exploiting the weak and poor in the society. So that is the reward of the system of Deen, that in which this sore sight of weak and poor will disappear. Human beings will get their due respect and dignity, and they will have the opportunity to develop their own self as well. Since the message is for the protection of the rights of the poor, hence it appeals to them, and some of them do get attracted towards it. After all the confrontations and oppositions, Nuh makes it clear to them that I will keep doing that which I am fully convinced about, and as a consequence, I count myself among those who are Muslims. In these verses, that is 71 and 72, there is a guidance for us in Tolu Islam. And now comes the crux. Firstly, accept and understand Wahi and its guidance, then join those who are on this path, keep strengthening the self through solid deeds, and communicate the message to others. Gradually, people will be attracted towards it. The key is to never give up, as where else one can find refuge after giving up on Allah. The law of requital ultimately catches up with people through their deeds. فَكَذَّبُوهُ فَنَجَّيْنَهُ وَمَنْ مَعَهُ فِي الْفُلْكِ وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ خَلَائِفَ وَأَغْرَقْنَا الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا فَانظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُنذَرِينَ. Very powerful verse and a statement of fact. He informed his nation about this clearly, but they falsified him and became bent upon opposing him. So we saved him and his companions who were in the boat from the storm and made them heirs of their opponents and drowned those people who had falsified our laws. Say to them that just reflect a little on this, that those people who were warned about the outcomes of their wrong path when they did not pay any attention to this warning, what was their end? Mu'mineen need to be steadfast on the path of Allah. Now arrives the crux of the struggle of Nuh and his companions, where they are faced with a choice. They witnessed clearly over a period of time, that is years after years of struggle. And Quran has mentioned about Hazrat Nuh that he 950 years, which means that he probably appeared at the end of that 950 years or 1,000-year span. And it takes long time. So results may not come in our individual life. As we have discussed previously, that what matters to us is that at a self level, we continue this challenge, this effort for the establishment of Deen. When it comes is not our responsibility. What we need to do is, after Iman, keep doing solid deeds, coming together and working together and passing on the message. And it was confirmed in the light of Allah's wahi that these opponents had reached that point of no return where they will be made to vacate the land which belongs to Allah for good. And we should keep it in mind that this earth belongs to Allah, this universe belongs to Allah. And these human beings whom we see in power, they have nothing in their hand. The only thing is that there is no Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen which is rising up. And now, of course, we are making an effort on these lines, but that is the way we should start thinking, or we should be thinking. The Quran has beautifully and concisely stated here that they falsified wahi and reached that point of no return where their elimination became a necessity according to the law of Allah. And I've quoted another verse over here, وَقَالَ نُوحٌ رَبِّ لَا تَذَرْ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ دَيَّارًا. And this is a state which, if the system of Deen does not materialize, we may also reach that state where we can make the same statement as Nuh made. And Nuh said, "O my Rabb, leave not of the Kafirin a single one on earth." Note here the strength and firmness of the psyche of Nuh. Just see the verses before this one and after 26 in this chapter 71. And these are very illuminating. At this point, Allah has to do what He has promised to Mu'mineen, i.e. to save them from the impending destruction which is about to descend on these transgressing people whose time of respite had passed as per the law of the Quieter. Here the Quran has pointed to another important point for our guidance, that since the universe is created as haq, hence here everything follows procedure and law. For example, in this verse, which we have gone through previously as well, وَخَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بِالْحَقِّ وَلِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. That whole of the universe is created for one purpose, and that is bil-haq, for a constructive purpose, so that every nafs which possesses choice and intent, and which is held responsible for whatever it does, kasabat, and nobody is to be treated unjustly. So what happened to the people of Nuh was as per the law of Allah. No injustice was done to them if their physical life was terminated earlier. It was terminated earlier because they had to be replaced by Mu'mineen, to whom they were unwilling to pass on control for the establishment of the system of Deen, so that justice would prevail on Allah's earth. We need to be clear that the earth belongs to Allah, not to human beings. For us, there is an important instruction here that if we have decided to be on this path, then our proclivities need to be altered in the light of the guidance of the Quran. The orientation of both heart and mind need to be focused on Deen and its need in the world, so that those who do injustice are questioned about the evil they are spreading on Allah's planet. So we should develop that sense of ownership as mu'mineen by following the Quran, that this earth belongs to Allah. And if we are his companions, then this earth belongs to us for the time we are here. Concluding remarks, the verse concludes with the words, "Fanzur kaifa kana aqibatul munzarin." Then just witness with your eyes what is the end of those who are warned and they refuse to heed this warning. What is their end? They will never return to this world, and as far as the next life is concerned, they will have nothing for the hereafter. And there is no pleasure in our hearts for that. We would like that maximum people should come to the Quran, at least to those who have been given message. And we have already seen what percent of people come towards the message to whom we have given the message so far. And that is a good way of looking at things, probably 5 to 10%. And that too only those come towards the Quran who are already looking for guidance. Their place in the universe will be completely erased as if they never existed. In the balance of Allah, there is nothing for them. And we should never ever have any sorrow for them, because that is part of our self-development, that we should have that firmness that the people who create problems in this world, particularly people who are given this message and they do not come to the Quran and keep doing zulm in the world, how can one have sympathy for them? There is guidance and instruction for Tolu Islam in these verses, in the model of Nuh and what he faced during his life on earth. He received wahi just like us. We have the Quran and started to communicate it to the people around him. Those who found an attraction in it joined him. And we have seen also those who have found attraction in the literature of Tolu Islam, which is based on the system of Deen. They have come towards Tolu Islam. Those who do not have any conviction in the system of Deen, who think that Deen cannot be established, or there is no system of Deen given in the Quran in the first place, then they will get nothing from the Quran. Because Quran is all about the system of Deen, because it is here to alleviate mankind from the chains in which they are suffering. Those who found an attraction in it joined him, and he kept on explaining it and helped them to develop themselves, as we have joined and are educating and training ourselves. This turned into a small Jamaat, most of which included people from the lower strata of society. And it is just like us, most are not wealthy. And we do have people who are from the lower strata as well, to whom the Quran has made an appeal. So there are a lot of similarities here. And that is why if any of us or any newcomers, if they express any frustrated thought, we should ask them to look at these slides and look at the model of Hazrat Nuh, even of Hazrat Yusuf, for example. He never gave up. Even in that prison, he knew that Allah's help will come to him. They continued this method until there remained no more who were willing to join this Jamaat, and then Nuh reached this conclusion that now he needs intervention from Allah's law. Otherwise, under the circumstances, this is the end of the road as far as his Jamaat is concerned. In our case, we will know when we will also be faced with very few options. Until then, we continue on our path firmly and resolutely in the presence of Allah and keep strengthening ourselves. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. We may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen, and this is our contact.